Hey, I'm Tamsin. I didn't expect this to be my story. But sometimes life writes your script in ink you never agreed to. That weekend, the air was dry and crisp when I pulled into my sister Delaney's driveway, the tires of my old Honda crunching over the gravel she'd always complained about, but never fixed. There was a breeze shaking the tops of the maples, and a faint trail of bubbles in the air, probably from some kid's leftover birthday party. It felt normal, too normal. But nothing about what I was about to see would ever be normal again. I stepped out, reached for my suitcase from the trunk, and walked toward the porch. I expected to hear laughter, maybe music, or the squeal of my daughter Bryony's voice greeting me with that jumpy excitement kids always reserve for their parents coming home. But there was no sound, not even a door creak, just silence. And then I opened the door. There she was. My daughter, 8 years old, knees on the hardwood floor, a bucket beside her, hands raw and red, clutching a used sponge. Her back hunched in that small, unnatural way that kids should never know. She didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her face didn't light up. Her eyes, God, her eyes, looked hollow, tired, heavy. Bryony? I dropped my bag, rushing to her. What are you doing? She blinked like she didn't understand the question. Then she said something so soft I barely heard it. Did I miss a spot? That moment, those 5 words, did something to me I still can't put into words. I scooped her up into my arms, sponge falling to the floor with a dull splash, and I felt her bones against my chest. Too prominent, too cold, too quiet. That's when I heard the front door swing open behind me, high-pitched laughter echoing into the hallway. Back already! Delaney walked in with her manicured nails, Louis Vuitton shades, perched on her head like a crown she didn't deserve. You weren't supposed to be here until tonight. Behind her, Beckett, her son, the so-called golden boy, was stuffing Disneyland popcorn into his mouth, a plastic lightsaber dangling from his hip. You took him to Disneyland? I asked, not hiding the tremble in my voice. She shrugged. It was a last-minute thing. He deserved a treat. I figured Bryony could stay and help around the house. You know, build some character. Character? I set Bryony down gently and stood. You left her alone here? Cleaning? Oh, come on. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. I left her snacks. She needed to learn responsibility anyway. She's not going to get far in life on those sad little drawings she's always doing. There it was. The first crack in my restraint. I left her with you because I trusted you, I said, stepping closer. Not so you could turn her into your housemaid while you treated your son like a prince. Delaney huffed. You're always so sensitive, Tamsin. No wonder things didn't work out for you. That stung more than I wanted to admit, because buried under that insult was a deeper cut, one I'd been trying to scab over for years. Later that night, after Delaney had shut herself in her bedroom like the queen she always pretended to be, I bathed Bryony. Her back was spotted with faint red marks, too organized to be random. I asked her gently. She wouldn't answer at first. Then she whispered. She said if I didn't do a good job, she'd make me start over. She poured the water on the floor and told me to clean it again. I had to walk out of the room to breathe. The next morning, while Bryony was still asleep, I checked my phone. Dozens of photos Delaney had posted. Beckett on rides, Beckett with Mickey Mouse, Beckett with a glowing caption, "He's my whole heart. Boy mom, Disney magic." And in my email, a fraud alert. Someone had used my credit card for hotel bookings in Anaheim. Delaney. Her name was on the reservation. She used my card. She used my child. She used me. And then she had the nerve to call it character building. I didn't confront her that morning. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I got Bryony dressed, fed her the pancakes she liked. Real ones, with butter and syrup, not dry cereal from a box. Then I packed. Quietly, deliberately. I told Delaney I had a client call and left. But something inside me had already changed. I wasn't just leaving her house. I was leaving a version of myself behind. the one that tolerated, that forgave, that believed blood made people family. That version was gone, because I saw the way Bryony flinched when Delaney raised her voice, the way she asked me, "Will I have to go back there again?" And I said, with every ounce of steel I had left, "Never again." And even though Delaney laughed when I cut contact, even though she told my mother I was being overly emotional, even though Beckett posted a TikTok mocking Bryony the crybaby, I stayed quiet, because I had started to listen more than I explained, because I had started to collect, because I was done with being the shadow in Delaney's perfect world. And maybe, just maybe, I had finally become the woman I wished someone had been for me when I was 8 years old and alone. Delaney didn't just grow up favored, she grew up chosen. Even when we were little girls, it was like the universe conspired to revolve around her. She was the kind of kid who won every class election without trying, who could break a vase and still get praised for her confidence in owning up to it. When I broke the rules, I was a problem. When she did, she was spirited. Mom used to call her the crown jewel of our family. Me? I was the one who tried hard. I remember once, I made this paper flower in art class, cut from purple tissue paper and glued onto a straw. I was maybe 9. I brought it home, beaming, hoping for even a flicker of attention. Delaney had entered the room with a blue ribbon from her debate competition. No one even looked at my flower. I learned early that my wins were invisible if hers were louder. I'd like to say it didn't matter, that I grew up and found my peace. But when you're constantly told your reflection isn't as shiny, it gets harder to see your own light. So when she started dating Jared, my first serious boyfriend, it felt like some cosmic joke. She had a fiancé already, but she said Jared was flirting, that he made a move. He didn't deny it. I was humiliated, and then crushed. I found out 2 weeks later they were together. My parents were sad for me, but invited him to Thanksgiving that year anyway. 3 months later, I found out I was pregnant. And by then, Jared was living with Delaney. She told me flat out, eyes full of faux pity, "You always knew he wasn't really in love with you." I'd like to say I walked away, that I took the high road, but I was numb, and alone, and pregnant. Delaney? She glowed. She married Jared before my 3rd trimester, had Beckett within the same year, called him their miracle. They never acknowledged the overlap. My parents even made a separate baby shower for me, so things wouldn't be awkward. It was more of a brunch. The gifts were practical: diapers, bottles, wipes. No one brought decorations. No one took pictures. But they threw Delaney a garden party with string lights and a live jazz trio. I still have the napkin from that day. It says, "Here comes the golden one." Beckett grew up golden. Bryony grew up surviving. When she was 5, she asked me, "Why do people always hug Beckett longer than me?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe because he had Jared. Maybe because Delaney still shone like polished gold while I was still rebuilding from the dust. But now I was watching the cost of that shine. For my daughter. And I couldn't keep pretending it was just about old wounds. That Sunday night, I sat in bed beside Bryony after she fell asleep, her tiny body curled like a comma beneath the blanket. I watched her sleep the way a soldier watches for movement, still on edge, even in the quiet. That's when I opened her school folder. It was still in her backpack. Inside were 3 drawings. One was of a princess. She was locked in a gray room with red marks on her arms. The second was of a boy, drawn in wild dark lines, standing over the princess with the words, "I'm the king," scratched above him. The third made me freeze. It was a house on fire. And in the bottom corner, a small figure drawn in blue crayon holding the match. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just imagination. It was documentation. Bryony was drawing her pain. And we had all missed it. I folded the papers slowly, like they were made of glass. Downstairs, I heard my phone buzz. A message from Mom. "I heard Delaney took Beckett to Disney. How sweet. You should do more fun things with Bryony too. She seems quiet lately." The kind of message only a mother like mine could send, smiling and gutting me at the same time. I didn't reply. I walked outside onto the porch, barefoot in the cool grass, and sat on the step where I used to cry when I was 16 and grounded for talking back. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I planned. The next morning, I called Bryony's school counselor. She'd left a voicemail 2 weeks ago, asking for a follow-up regarding Bryony's social withdrawal. At the time, I was juggling freelance deadlines and dismissed it as standard school concern. Now I wanted details. Mrs. James, the counselor began gently, we've noticed some changes in Bryony since the holiday break. She's quieter, more avoidant. She flinches when someone raises their voice, even jokingly. We've had 2 incidents where she refused to participate in group work. She told her teacher she didn't feel safe. Safe? I echoed. Yes. And, she paused, Bryony asked if she could be transferred to another family. That did it. I hung up and went to the garage, dug out the bin labeled taxes and receipts, pulled out every credit card statement from the last 6 months, cross-checked dates, Disneyland, Anaheim, gas, food, all on my card. Delaney didn't just manipulate me, she exploited me, and she hurt Bryony in the process. That night, I started building a file. Screenshots, photos, statements, even the drawings. Not because I was looking for revenge in the way people think, fire and fury, but because I knew what would happen if I said something outright. Delaney would cry, deny, reframe, gaslight. It's a misunderstanding. She's being dramatic. You've always hated me. She'd spin it until people looked at me and wondered, is Tamsin unstable? So I wouldn't scream. I would document. I would gather proof like a lawyer preps a case. Because some queens only fall when you show the court the crown was stolen. I didn't hear from Delaney for a week. Not even a guilt-soaked text or a fake-friendly meme from Instagram. Radio silence. But it didn't mean she wasn't watching. I knew her patterns too well. She was waiting for my outburst. For the moment she could twist my reaction into the problem. That's how she played it. She never started the fire. She just passed the matches. So I gave her nothing. No confrontation, no storm, just space. Because I wasn't done gathering. Bryony stayed quiet too. Quieter than usual. She'd sit cross-legged on the carpet after school, coloring endlessly. Princesses with locks on their mouths, tigers in cages. One afternoon, she looked up and asked, do you think people get to pick their families? Like, before they're born? I didn't answer. I was afraid if I did, the truth might unravel her completely. The next Thursday, I stopped by my old friend Mira's house. She's a paralegal, the kind of woman who knows how to find things that weren't meant to be found. I need a favor, I said, sliding the file of screenshots across her kitchen table. She lifted her brows. That your sister? I nodded. Mira read through the Disneyland receipts, the hotel charges, the texts where Delaney told a friend that Bryony was basically a stray cat Tamsin brought into the family. I'd read that line a dozen times, but hearing someone else breathe it aloud made my skin crawl all over again. She used your card, called your daughter a stray, and let her clean her house while she took her own kid to the Magic Kingdom? That about sums it up. She whistled, low and sharp. This is enough for a fraud report, maybe even a small claims case. Want me to run a background scan? I hesitated. Revenge wasn't the goal. Protection was. Still, I said yes. Because something inside me wanted to know. Who exactly had I been protecting Bryony from all these years? A few days later, Mira sent me a PDF. It included a report Delaney filed 2 years ago, an application for a small business grant for single mothers launching wellness brands. On it, she'd claimed she was a single parent. Delaney, married, with 2 incomes, calling herself a single mom to get free money. There it was again, the lie as strategy. I stared at the document on my laptop screen while Bryony slept in the next room. The glow of the file reflected in my coffee mug, and suddenly I was back at Delaney's wedding. Back in the front row, watching Jared slide a ring onto her finger, while I sat with my pregnant belly under a borrowed dress. Back then, I told myself it was better to forgive, that carrying bitterness would only hurt me. But now I realized something I hadn't let myself say aloud. Delaney hadn't just stolen a man, she'd stolen my voice. Every time I'd been told to keep the peace, to move on, to be the bigger person, they weren't protecting the family. They were protecting her, the queen. Sunday came fast. I was driving Bryony to her art class when she quietly said, "Beckett told me to kneel." What? Back at their house. He said I had to kneel if I wanted to eat lunch. He called it training. I pulled over. My fingers were white against the steering wheel. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked. "Because you always say not to start fights." I couldn't breathe for a second. Because she wasn't wrong. I had said that. To her. And to myself. 100 times. Don't make waves. Don't provoke. Just endure. And what had that taught her? To kneel. In that moment, I felt something tear loose inside me. A rope I'd held taut for too long. My entire chest burned with it. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Sweetheart, listen to me," I said, voice low, trembling. "You never have to kneel for anyone. Not in my house. Not in this life." She nodded. But I saw it. Uncertainty behind her lashes. She didn't believe me yet, but she would. Back at home, I added the new details to my file. One section for financial misuse. One for emotional neglect. And now, physical intimidation. Bryony's drawings went into protective sleeves. The photos. The messages. All of it was becoming real. Tangible. Proof. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a historian, a collector of damage, a builder of truth. And that night, truth arrived in another unexpected twist. An anonymous message pinged my inbox. Subject: from someone who knows. Body: she's done this before, to me. Different situation, same cruelty. You're not the only one. No name, no return address. Just the confirmation I didn't realize I needed. Delaney wasn't just mean. She was habitual. And somewhere out there, someone else had bled the same way. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt loaded. Every quiet hour, every skipped call, every unopened message. They weren't signs of avoidance. They were weight, intent, preparation. I was becoming dangerous, but not in the way Delaney expected. And certainly not in the way she could prepare for. I wasn't sharpening a sword. I was polishing a mirror. I had 3 files now. One digital, backed up on multiple clouds. One printed and stashed in a fireproof box. One flash drive I kept hidden in Bryony's old stuffed lion. A small, stitched pocket behind its button eye. The irony wasn't lost on me. That lion had once been a gift from Delaney when Bryony was born, back when she still pretended to love us both. I had receipts. For everything. Friday afternoon, Bryony came home from school with another drawing. This one was different. It wasn't dark. It was her, standing in front of a house with smoke coming out of the chimney. A woman stood beside her. The woman had her hand on Bryony's shoulder. I asked, "Who's this?" She smiled. "That's you." I choked a little on my own breath. "Oh, baby." She shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "I just like drawing us when we're safe." Safe. That word landed heavy. Because it wasn't just about physical safety anymore. Bryony had learned the difference between presence and protection. Delaney was always present. Loud. Demanding. Look at me at every family event. But never protective. Never loving. Not unless someone was watching. That same evening, I got a call from Mira again. "Hey," she said, her voice low. "You sitting down?" "Do I need to be?" She chuckled, but it didn't sound amused. "I pulled some public records like you asked. Financial ones. Grant reports, school board involvement, charity boards. Delaney's name shows up on 7 nonprofit rosters, 3 of which she never disclosed having ties to. You know what that means?" "She's funneling?" "Maybe not quite that, but close. Overlap of influence, conflict of interest. She's been securing funding from organizations where she sits on approval boards. It's unethical as hell, and maybe even illegal if someone pushes it. I closed my eyes. Of course. Delaney didn't steal with hands. She stole with status. Also, Mira added, I found something else. Check your email. It's about Beckett. The email contained a scanned letter. From Beckett's school. Subject: Behavior Incident Report. Dated 4 months ago. Beckett Delaney Rose exhibited violent behavior toward another student. The student was pushed to the ground and verbally threatened. This marks the second report involving physical aggression. I reread it 3 times. There it was. The golden boy had teeth and claws, and Delaney had hidden them all behind curated photos, edited captions, and matching holiday pajamas. But not from me, not anymore. I needed more than anger. I needed reach. So I started writing. A blog post, not with names, not yet, but with a voice. A mother's voice. One that bled truth slowly, steadily, without sounding bitter, just honest. I titled it, Raising Daughters in the Shadows of Golden Boys. It was raw, measured, unfiltered, but not unhinged. I wrote about Bryony kneeling for lunch, about the women who taught me to stay small to keep the peace, about how girls are trained to smile through hunger because someone more important is eating. I didn't post it, not yet, but I read it. Aloud. To myself. And for the first time, my voice didn't shake. The next day, I saw Delaney's name trending locally on Facebook. Someone had tagged her in a parenting group thread. I clicked. The post read, Anyone else notice how some PTA moms use charity work to inflate their brand, but do nothing real behind closed doors? Beneath it, a comment. It's the ones with the perfect profile pictures that scare me the most. Then another. Ask her how she treats her niece. Just ask. Anonymous. But not from me. I hadn't said a word. Others were beginning to see. That night, Bryony woke up from a dream, calling out. I ran to her room. She sat up, disoriented. Was I back there? She asked. No, sweetheart. You're home. She clutched my arm. I don't want to go back. Ever. Not even for a birthday. Not for anything. You won't, I promised. And in that moment, I decided. I wasn't just going to protect her from going back. I was going to make sure there was nowhere for her to go back to. No illusion left. No crown left to polish. The invitation arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope, thick and perfumed like everything Delaney touched. It was for our mother's 70th birthday dinner. Formal, family-only, semi-catered. Dressed to honor legacy, the card read, as if anyone in that room still believed we shared one. I held the invitation over the sink for a full 2 minutes, watching the light catch on the embossed letters. Bryony stood in the doorway, clutching her sketch pad. Are we going? She asked without looking up. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, We're showing up. It wasn't the same thing. When the day came, I wore a slate gray dress with clean lines and a neckline high enough to protect. Bryony wore deep blue, her hair in a braid we did together that morning. I pinned her sketchbook in her bag, just in case. That child carried her piece in pictures now. We arrived late, on purpose. The dining room was already buzzing with the artificial warmth of a family that smiles harder when secrets sit at the table. Glasses clinked. Our mother floated between guests in pearls. Delaney stood near the head of the table, wrapped in an ivory sheath dress, laughing with someone too loud. Her crown, invisible as always, still perfectly perched. Beckett was showing off a TikTok dance in the corner. When he saw Bryony, his grin curled, and he whispered something to his cousin, who laughed. Bryony looked at me. I gave her the nod. She walked to the far end of the table, next to Aunt Louise, who always had peppermints in her bag and knew when not to ask questions. I approached the bar, poured a glass of water, and waited. Delaney found me first. Well, she said with a smile too sharp, didn't expect you'd have the nerve. I didn't answer. I looked at her. Then slowly, deliberately, I pulled out a small flash drive from my clutch and set it on the white linen table. She blinked. What's that? Insurance. You're making a scene. Not yet. She leaned in, whispering now. You really want to do this? In front of Mom? On her birthday? I smiled. I didn't make the mess, Delaney. I just stopped cleaning it for you. She opened her mouth, but the sound of a fork tapping a glass cut her off. Dad was standing at the head of the table now, calling for attention. Before dessert, he said, voice too polished. Delaney wanted to say a few words. Of course she did. She stood beside him, lifted her glass, and began her performance. I just want to say, she beamed, this family has meant everything to me. Through every challenge, we've stayed strong, loyal, united. I could feel Bryony stiffen from across the room. I'm so proud to raise my son with these values. Beckett, she said, gesturing, come say something nice about your grandma. Beckett groaned, but stood. Happy birthday, I guess. Thanks for the money last Christmas. Laughter, a few claps. Delaney took back the spotlight. And I'm especially proud of the women in this family. Tamsin, for example, raising her daughter alone, staying strong despite, well, we don't always see eye to eye, but family is about forgiving and loving unconditionally. The air turned heavy. She looked directly at me when she said it. And that was it. I stood, clinked my own glass. Everyone turned. I wasn't planning to speak, I began. But since we're celebrating honesty, my voice didn't tremble. In the past few months, I've learned a lot about what family really means. It's not just about blood or appearances. It's about safety, protection, truth. A few people shifted in their chairs. Delaney, I said, eyes never leaving hers. Do you remember what you told Bryony when she asked for lunch? Her smile faltered. She was supposed to be earning her keep, she snapped. Children need structure. I nodded. Did that structure include calling her a stray? Making her scrub floors while you took your son on vacation with my money? Gasps around the table. Delaney's face turned red. You don't have proof. I reached into my bag, pulled out the printed files, photos, screenshots, gave them to Uncle Warren, then to Aunt Louise, then to my mother. This, I said, is who she really is, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Delaney lunged for the papers. Dad stepped between us. Enough, he said. But it wasn't enough. Bryony stood, voice small but clear. She made me kneel, for food. The room froze. Aunt Louise let out a breath like a balloon deflating. Delaney turned white. That's not true. She's lying. She's confused. Bryony didn't flinch. She poured water on the floor and made me clean it, then laughed. No one moved. No one defended her. Delaney turned to our mother. Say something! But Mom just looked at her, and then, for the first time I could remember, said nothing. I turned to Bryony. Let's go. We walked out, through the silence. Not angry, not victorious. Just done. The air outside was cold. Bryony slipped her hand into mine. You didn't yell, she whispered. No, I said. We didn't need to. The morning after the dinner, my phone buzzed at 6:12 a.m. I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd spent most of the night watching Bryony breathe. The sound of her quiet inhale-exhale, a better lullaby than anything I could have conjured on my own. The screen flashed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Mom. I stared at it. Let it ring. She called again an hour later, then once more around lunch. The fourth time, I picked up. I hope you're proud, she said, skipping hello. Her voice was tight, like it was pinched between her back teeth. I'm calm, I replied. That's something. You embarrassed her, in front of the whole family, on my birthday. I told the truth. You caused a scene. No. Delaney wrote the scene. I just stopped playing my part. There was a long silence. For a second, I almost believed she might soften. She's your sister, Tamsin. And Bryony is my daughter. Her sigh was sharp. You've always had a problem letting things go. I laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just tired. She made my child kneel for food, Mom. She stole from me, lied. What exactly am I supposed to let go? Another pause. You've always been dramatic. There it was. Same script, same deflection. I ended the call without saying goodbye. That week, the ripple started. A neighbor sent me a screenshot of a local Facebook group. Anyone know if the allegations against Delaney Rose are real? Something about child mistreatment and PTA misconduct? In the comments, an anonymous post. Not the first time. Check her donation record. Check the school board minutes. It wasn't mine. I hadn't said anything beyond the family room. But it was out there now. The walls were cracking. Delaney posted a photo that night on Instagram. Her and Beckett, smiling with matching pumpkin lattes, captioned, "Just us. Unbothered and thriving." The comments didn't match the tone. "Didn't you just get reported to CPS? Thriving off stolen money?" She deleted it an hour later, then blocked me. 3 days later, I got a letter. Hand-delivered. No postage. The envelope was monogrammed. Inside was a folded card with just 4 words. "You went too far." No signature. But I knew the handwriting. Jared. My stomach didn't twist like I thought it would. I put the card in a drawer and didn't look at it again. At school, Bryony's counselor called me in for a meeting. "She's improved," she said. "More expressive, less withdrawn." "Still scared?" The counselor hesitated. "She's cautious, but also observant. That's a strength." I nodded. "She's been drawing again," the counselor added. "She made one of you, with a cape." My throat caught. She said, "My mom doesn't fly. She just walks in and fixes things quietly." I didn't cry. But I carried those words with me like a second spine. The final unraveling came through Mira, as usual. She sent me a Dropbox link. Inside were the scanned board records from the nonprofit where Delaney served as treasurer. A red flag memo had been buried in archived minutes. Funds transferred out of cycle. Checks approved with no co-signatures. One donor had withdrawn after citing ethical concerns. It was enough to trigger an audit. Delaney had spent years weaving her image into the community. But once people started pulling the thread, the whole thing came undone faster than anyone expected. She resigned 2 weeks later, claimed it was to focus on family. Our father called the night after the resignation went public. "I don't want to fight," he said. "Then don't." "She's not perfect, but she's still your blood." I exhaled. "So is Bryony." "She's a child." "Exactly. A child who knows the difference between love and control better than half this family." He didn't respond, but before he hung up, he said, "For what it's worth, I never knew." That made me pause, not because it was redemption, but because it was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from him. I began packing a week later, not dramatically. No big announcements, just boxes, lists, school transfers, rental agreements. I chose a small town 3 hours north. Near water, near trees. Far enough. Bryony picked the house. "It looks like it has dreams," she said, pointing at the photo on my laptop. I looked at her. "You're going to make it have dreams," I told her. On our last day in the old house, I stood in the doorway of Bryony's room. The walls were bare. Her drawings had all been packed, except one she insisted on leaving behind. It was of a door, closed, no lock, no key. Just the words, "Some things don't get opened again." She taped it inside the closet, and then we left. Our new home sat at the edge of a narrow, winding road, in a town where no one knew our last name. It was a single-story cottage wrapped in soft white siding, with shutters that creaked in the wind, and a porch swing that leaned a little to the left. There were flaws, but they weren't loud. They were honest. Bryony called it our quiet place. I called it the beginning. The first week was slow. We unpacked in stages. I let her choose which walls would hold her drawings. The fridge collected magnets from gas stations and welcome kits. Our neighbors waved from across driveways, but didn't ask questions. They smiled, handed over extra zucchini, and left space. At night, Bryony fell asleep faster than she had in months. No dreams, no muttering, just soft, even breaths. One evening, I stood at the window with a cup of tea, watching the wind move through the trees. I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't flinching at footsteps. The silence didn't scare me anymore. A month passed. Bryony started at her new school. She came home on the second day with a colored paper badge that said, Helper of the Week. She grinned so hard I thought her cheeks might split. I helped Ava with her painting, she said. I didn't tell her what to paint. I just passed her colors. I smiled. That's real help, she nodded. Like you did for me. I spent the next weeks rebuilding, not just around us, but inside me. There were still sharp edges. I still woke up sometimes expecting a battle, but those mornings were fewer now. I started writing again. Not blog posts, not evidence, just words that didn't need to prove anything. Stories. For children like Bryony. About girls who turned hurt into tools. About mothers who weren't perfect, but who showed up anyway. The first story was about a girl who lived in a house made of glass that cracked every time someone lied. The second was about a lion who roared only when no one was looking. The third? That one was Bryony's idea. She called it, The Girl Who Stopped Hiding Under Tables. One Saturday, we visited the local library. It was small, sunlit, run by a woman named Lydia, who wore scarves in her hair and called everyone Dear Heart. Bryony found a corner and started sketching. I wandered into the nonfiction section, and as I was flipping through a book on trauma recovery, someone touched my arm. Excuse me, the woman said. Are you Tamsin Rose? I stiffened. I used to follow your blog, the one about raising daughters near the Shrine of Golden Boys. My mouth went dry. She smiled softly. I just wanted to say, thank you. My sister made my son feel small. Your words helped me leave. I blinked hard. Thank you, I whispered. No, she said. Thank you for speaking, even when no one clapped. She walked away. Bryony peeked around the corner a moment later. You okay? I nodded. More than okay. She grinned. Then let's go get donuts. Back home, Bryony laid out her latest piece on the dining table. It was bold. Bright. A girl with a crown in one hand and a paintbrush in the other. What's the title? I asked. She shrugged. You pick. I thought for a moment. How about No More Shadows? She looked up, face lit. I love that. 2 days later, I got an email. From a local press. Subject line. We'd love to interview you about your upcoming children's book. I read it 3 times. The book I hadn't told anyone about. Somehow, someone found it. I wasn't sure if I'd say yes. But the thought didn't scare me. Because for the first time in years, the spotlight didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a choice. The room was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the microphone being tested. Rows of folding chairs filled the small community center, their seats slowly claimed by strangers with notebooks, coffee cups, and curious eyes. I stood at the side of the stage, my palms warm against the paper I'd folded 3 times too many. Not from nerves, from memory. A woman with a clipboard approached. You're on in 2 minutes, Ms. Rose. I nodded, offered a small smile, and looked out at the modest crowd. No lights blinding me, no cameras, just people, real people. And one small person in the front row, legs swinging, clutching a crumpled sketch pad like a lucky charm. Bryony grinned up at me. You got this, she mouthed. My heart pulled in the best way. I stepped onto the stage, cleared my throat, spoke. I wasn't always brave. In fact, for most of my life, I was quiet. Not in the shy way, in the trained way. The kind of quiet you develop when your voice never fits the room. When your pain isn't taken seriously. When survival depends on shrinking. For a long time, I believed peace meant compliance. Until my daughter taught me otherwise. She was 8 the first time someone powerful tried to break her spirit. And she looked at me with eyes that asked, without words, if I'd be the kind of woman who'd do nothing. And I said no. I said it without screaming, without slamming doors. I said it by walking away, and by refusing to return. There was silence. Then a slow clap. Then more. Not thunderous, but enough. Enough for a woman who had learned that the most important applause comes from within. After the talk, people lined up with quiet stories. A woman whose brother had stolen her name to rack up debt. A man whose mother told him pain was weakness. A young girl who said, "I'm not brave like your daughter, but I want to be." I answered them all the same way. You don't have to be brave all at once, just once more than the last time. That night, Bryony and I walked home under a sky stitched with stars. Were you nervous? She asked. A little. You didn't look it. You didn't see my hands. She laughed. I think you're famous now. I shook my head. Fame is when people know your name. Peace is when you don't need them to. She stopped walking, pointed at a small rundown bookstore with a handwritten sign in the window. Author, reading Tamsin Rose. Thursday night, her face lit up. You're on a sign. I guess I am. You should take a picture. I did, but only because she asked. A week later, I mailed a package. No return address. Inside was a copy of my children's book, signed in quiet ink. I didn't send it to Delaney, I sent it to Beckett. The note inside said, "Sometimes people teach you how not to be. That's still a lesson. I hope you learn something softer." I never knew if he read it, and it didn't matter, because I didn't need anything back. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a message from a school administrator. Bryony had submitted a drawing to a statewide art competition and won. The piece was titled, "The Girl Who Chose Light." She had drawn herself standing in a forest. Her hands held two things, a lantern and a paper crown. And in the corner, a small door, nailed shut, with a single key hanging beside it. The judges wrote, her work tells a story of freedom, not through escape, but through choosing never to return. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Let it echo in the places that used to house anger. Some months later, Bryony and I were in the attic. She found an old shoebox taped shut. Inside were photographs, letters, a pressed flower from a high school dance. Among them, a photo of me and Delaney. Young. Before everything. Bryony held it up. Do you want to keep this? I looked at the girl in the photo, at her smile that didn't reach her eyes, at the hand on her shoulder that always squeezed a little too tightly. No, I said. I already kept the part that mattered. She dropped it into the donation pile. No hesitation, no ceremony, just clarity. That was the last door I ever closed, and I haven't opened it since. Not out of spite, out of peace, because some people confuse forgiveness with an invitation. I chose boundaries instead, not to punish them, but to preserve myself. And I've never lived more fully, or more freely. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do, not to escape, but to reclaim your voice in a space where it was once silenced. I learned that peace isn't always soft, and strength isn't always loud. It took years to understand that family isn't just blood, it's who shows up, who protects, and who lets you grow. If my story resonates with you, I hope it reminds you, you're not alone. Maybe you've had to shut a door too. Maybe you're still deciding if you should. So I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you were expected to stay loyal to? Where are you watching from? And if this video touched your heart, even just a little, drop a comment or tell me what you took away from it. If you didn't like this video, that's okay too. Let me know why. Feedback helps us grow. And if you want more stories that speak to real struggles and quiet courage, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for the next one. You belong here.